Well, we just passed St. Patrick's Day, and we know, like clockwork, what comes next in this season. It's power ranking time. I mean, we finally have enough information that we can make some kind of intelligent decision about where teams are sitting. Granted, those of us like myself, we're going to make 5 or 6 or 7 more trades and make some pretty wild moves in terms of where we are now versus where we're going to be. Others have kept their powder relatively dry and probably will make smaller moves, either towards the middle or towards the top as teams try and separate themselves. But as mentioned, with the information we have, we probably can do enough to really start breaking out who are contenders and sort of who's in that middle or also rank class. But anyways, we've got, I think, 5 or 6 different power ranks in here. And I've got a wonderful co-host in the Eagles to walk through with me, RJ, as usual. Thanks again for joining.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks for saying I'm a half-decent co-host.
Well, I think the results speak for itself with our overwhelming number of viewers. I haven't actually checked to see what, after the fact, our show numbers look like, but I'm sure we might even get into the dozens for some of these episodes. Which
I like that.
You know what? It's we're not looking to rule the world here. I think I saw a statistic that 84% of podcasts fail within their first 5 episodes. So we're beating the odds here, and you're a big part of making that happen. So appreciate you jumping on here. And as everyone else knows, you want to join one of these, just shoot me a DM and we'll get you looped in here. Usually about the same time, same channel, pretty much every week, except for the weeks I'm not traveling because, shockingly, I'd rather spend that time with my wife and my kids when I have the opportunity to do so. But nonetheless, we're talking power ranks. So as mentioned, we've got 5 teams that have put power ranks in there. Myself, the Eagles, Giants, Panthers, and Buccaneers. Shout out to the Giants who I think represented themselves as the anonymous goose for the better part of the day, which, again, it's just fantastic for all of us who have, strong feelings towards some of the goose trades and stuff from time to time. But you know what? I appreciate everyone taking the time to get their opinions on paper. Look, I think some of this stuff was done out of spite for some teams. Some people have adjusted it. Some of them, I think, have some explaining to do. But nonetheless, we've got our 5 tiers or 4 tiers, contenders, playoff teams, on the fence, and maybe next year. And we'll get into this as we go here. But a lot of, I'd say, hesitation to put a lot of people in that upper tier for most of the rankers. Like I only had 8 teams as either contenders or playoff teams right now. Obviously, we have 14 playoff spots, so a lot more teams I'm on the fence on, but a lot more teams I feel like have yet to separate themselves of, are they really going to be somebody who's a solid playoff team, or are they a team that probably have a pick that can end up in the teens, which I think is real fun for anyone looking to add 2026 futures or who still has their 2026 future. Because that means that pick has some good upside, which again makes for good trades. I know RJ, you know what? As we're doing this, you're changing your playoff teams. Man, I'm trying to make hot takes, and you're killing me here.
No, but they make sense. It's so true. You have swayed me on a couple of these already.
But yeah, I have 8 teams in the playoff teams or contenders. Giants has 8 teams. Panthers has 9 teams. Eagles now I think has 8 or 9 teams. Buccaneers is the only one who actually has the stones to get closer to a full playoff at this point. But either way, we'll start at the bottom because that's the most fun place to start. Folks that end up in the not your year spot. We've got the Titans, the Patriots, the Bills, the Broncos, the 49ers, the Dolphins, the Cardinals, the Colts, and the Bears. And I think this pretty well separates into, I'd say, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for sure they're going to tank teams that have already kind of made the moves that if they can get out of this year's draft, they are. Otherwise, they have basically minimal assets on their team right now. They have picks in this year's draft, and then they're already positioning towards next year. But frankly, there's just not a strong chance they're going to compete this year. And then there's the, probably belong in that tier 4, but just haven't done enough to get up there yet. And for me, that's the Cardinals, the 49ers, the Bills, and the Pats. Cowboys, again, I don't know what the hell they're doing. Nobody ever knows what the hell they're doing. So, I don't know. What do you feel about these guys? I think you had most of these in your bottom tier, right?
Yep, I did. Cardinals is one of the interesting ones, just because that team is. I don't want to say like going to be a contender, but it's a couple of pieces away, and we know that that there are picks to do it, but we are grading this off of what's on the roster right now. So, that one, and what was the other one that got mentioned? Oh, Cowboys, my division mate. Cowboys is a decent roster, probably around the same as Cardinals. Just he's unfortunately in the NFC East, which is a division where apparently all of us think we're contenders year in, year out. So we're always buying, and we all have decent teams.
Right. And I mean, I sent a bunch of offers. Again, I hope everyone's sitting down for that before we started the show, just because I always like to have content pop mid-show if we can. But anyways, I was looking at Cardinals' team as I was sending offers, and this was one of those where, look, he's got a quarterback, and he's got, I guess, someone who's, quote, competing for a starting quarterback role in Cleveland with Kenny Pickett. Jalen Wright is going to get an increased role in Miami this year, so he's got kind of his RB2 or RB3 there, and then whatever happens with Jalen McLaughlin. So he's kind of missing that RB1 or 1/2 to kind of lead that backfield. He's got Pickens, he's got Vele, he's got Davis. He's kind of missing that wide receiver 1/2 to kind of serve as the other, top option next to Pickens. He's got Laporta. He's got Campbell, who, bless his heart, just keeps somehow chugging out 150-plus point seasons year after year. And he's got some good young pieces elsewhere on his defense. Like, if he made the decision to trade picks to add some of those pieces, he could compete at least NFC wildcard this year and continue to build as his guys grow, for the NFC West. Like, Seahawks is a damn good team, no question. But I think last year we saw that they could be vulnerable, especially in the playoffs. So I would be interested to see if he did want to move his picks, what that could bring back. And again, Dolphins is the other side of that. Obviously, a lot more building to do, no question. But he's sitting there with 6, 8, and 9 on his trade bait. He has Penix. He has Spencer Rattler. Again, who knows what Rattler's value is going to be this year. Akers maybe getting crowded out in Minnesota with the Mason acquisition. Again, he's got sort of fringe pieces everywhere else as he tries to build completely through the draft, but he's got 52 years, so he can make 13 draft picks before getting to fifth rounders. That's a lot of players. And he's got 27 total players. So again, it would imply that he's planning to take 13 players and have that round out his roster. But, strategically buying with some of those, and not just Treylon Burks. Like, go get something a little bit stronger, and not from me. Again, I'm not trying to advocate for trades with me. I think that's pretty obvious in what I say every single week. But go grab that. Maybe again, this is just an example. Maybe Dallas Turner isn't looking as great to Packers right now, and he'd take, a late first or an early second for that player, considering he was like a 123 or something last year. Other players who have that mid to late first value, maybe Blake Corum from the Falcons is somebody who you can go grab for one of those seconds or something like that. Like start actually trying to use some of this draft capital, which people are starting to go a little bit nuts for, and round out some edges so that you don't have to truly be on the craps table for 4 hours to make a profit.
Yeah, that's fair. There's some decent stuff on trade bait, so you can, take a pretty lazy approach to it and probably find some decent stuff.
And again, it's not to me, but I hope that, he's not taking just the layback there with the trade bait, that he sent out a couple of, if I was to get rid of 6, what would it look like? Or if I was to get rid of 8 and 9, what would that look like? Obviously, everyone knows I love my runs, so I've come and checked on those, and I've gotten a bunch of declines. But again, I'm hoping that he's got his trade bait up there because he's trying to do something with it, and he's actually making offers with some of that stuff, and not just hoping somebody comes and offers him the moon because they fall in love with those 3 picks. Anyways, so that's Cardinals, that's Colts, Bears. I think Bears did a good job moving out of Justin Fields. Did it at the right time. Was able to maximize what they could get for him. I don't know if they're ever going to get what they gave to get him in the first place, but probably got about 70-80% of it back in terms of what they did to trade him to Texans. So I like that. And then Patriots and Cowboys. Yeah, we talked about Cowboys have just got to do something. He's got a lot of, I'd say, not necessarily older pieces at running back and receiver. He's got studs in Parsons and Hurts. He's been, again, doing what I've been suggesting Dolphins do, and strategically buy certain pieces. But I don't think he has enough draft capital to buy all the pieces he needs to, especially in your guys' division. So kind of, if he's going to tank. If he's going to go for it, he needs to flip some of these, younger, bigger pieces into more go for it things. But he's kind of in purgatory right now, and he's not going to get out of there unless he does something here.
Yep.
All right. That's all I have to say about that. Anything else in the not your year tier that you want to add?
No. It's not their year. Shouldn't spend too much time on them.
Got it. All right. So let's talk about the on the fence Rams and Chargers. So I just spent a good amount of time talking about people we shouldn't spend a lot of time talking about. So I'll let you pick between the Rams and Chargers who you want to talk about first.
I really like the Chargers. Like I like that roster. I like the pieces that he has. He's probably not winning a whole lot of games this year, more than he did last year, but not by much. But yeah, he has a lot of solid young pieces. Young, looks like a decent quarterback. At least like he'll stick around. He's the one that took the gamble on Jonathan Brooks, so I hope that pans out. His wide receivers are something to be proud of, though. Having BTJ and Rashee Rice, that's going to be really good in a year or two. I mean, they're good now, but just building around those two, like this team's going to be good.
Yeah, Adonai is a nice number 3 there as well. And I mean, it's one of those like deceiving teams too, because yes, I agree. On the surface, it's going to take a little while for him. These guys have got to kind of age up into the point where they can really contribute. But just from sheer schedule, so he's going to have Bill twice, and Bill is racing to the bottom as quickly as he can. Based off of his 4th place finish last year, he's going to get the Dolphins, and he's going to get, I think, the Colts. So those are going to be probably 2 wins, as they also race for the bottom, and Chargers may have too many points on his team to actually not win those. And then depending who he matches up against for the NFC, like he may mess around and get to 5 or 6 wins.
Yeah. Yep. I can see that happening.
I mean, especially with he's invested his draft capital. He again, I love this concept. This league helped me come up with it, but the idea of he's locked in a value for his draft capital already. Like he traded Xavier Worthy and his first and got Brian Thomas Jr. And I know we don't love trade calculators on in this league, but if I just kind of plug it into one as we go here, the delta between Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr. is the 106 in a normal league. So we're talking about, he sold his pick at a 106 value. So as long as he's not actively tanking, he's probably going to get more value from that trade than he would just by keeping that pick. So again, kudos to him in terms of taking a different approach and getting the value he wanted out of that. And I think he turned the pick that he turned around and got moved basically for the 113 and a move up. So sold it for the 106 and then it got sold for like the 118. So not exactly the worst situation to be in either.
Nope.
Rams, again, he's interesting. Again, I like this tier. And like I said, I think Cardinals probably belongs on this tier. And again, if he did a couple of things, Dolphins could make himself on this tier. But I think Rams is right there too. He's got 2 quarterbacks. He's got Tyrone Tracy. He's got contributors kind of all over the roster. It's one of those teams you think 2 years ago, God, he just needs to sell and rebuild. But somehow he keeps turning what he has into enough to be relevant in the wild card race or to win the division. Like before the Seahawks won the division last year, I think Rams had won it 3 straight years. So he's on the fence here because it might be time for him to push some of those things in to rebuild, but God help him. He makes a couple of acquisitions here and he's got some 2026 firsts to be able to do it with. He's in the wild card race for sure, if not higher. And that's the thing we see in the league. If you make the wild card, all sorts of things can happen. I think at least one of the divisional participants in each of our last 5 years has been a wild card team that's made it through to the final. And that's going beyond hey, there's only one bye team. So obviously one of the team has to play in the wild card. You know what I mean? Like a team that was a wild card or one of those fringe division winners is in the final every year. Someone who you wouldn't have exactly placed to be there at the beginning of the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, this he's done a good job of slowly building this team out. It could go either way, but I think he's closer to being a competing team. His trade with you earlier in the offseason to get Brees is what really put him over the top. So, the only thing he really needs to do, and this is going to be probably the hardest thing to do, is he has 326 picks, if I'm not mistaken, first. His and 2 others. And he has is it the 130? Let me check. No, he doesn't have the 130. He doesn't. Yes, but he has 3 first-round picks. So he has everything but wide receiver on offense, at least for this year with having Zach Ertz. So buying a wide receiver 1, and I'd probably say wide receiver 2, is he's going to be competing for the division. At that point, it's just navigating that and actually buying those and having some assets left over to improve the team. That's going to be the biggest thing.
Yep. And again, people go pick crazy right now, and there's enough teams trying to convert picks this year into picks next year that he has the ammo to go do that. It's just a matter of finding the right deal. And I know he's got that up on his trade bait, but that doesn't always pull the offers you need to kind of make that happen. So again, to the point that I opened the show with, based off of how people rated, the 5 teams rated things, there's 5 teams, either as contenders or fringe contenders. We've talked about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 who are either on the fence or not their year. So by basic mathematics, that means we have 16 teams who are potential playoff teams. Some have a little bit more work to do than others. Others haven't made their move yet. Others, there's just big questions and, frankly, how things turn out. Like, hey, look, AFC North is a killing field. Got it. There's only so much you can do to get above potential playoff team for some of the teams in there. Others, it's kind of like, hey, whoever, like, somebody's got to win the AFC South. So one of those teams is a potential playoff team just because nature of where they are. But 16 teams when there's 14 playoff teams and 5 contenders here definitely shows that there's a lot of movement to be done here for basically over half the league if they want to try and make the playoffs. Let's see, where should we start? So I talked about the AFC South to start with, so maybe that's a good place. So the Colts and the Titans were in the not your year, which firmly puts the Jags and the Texans in the potential playoff teams here. So the Texans have done a good job of sort of just continuing to rotate and build on very strategic trades out his team. And right now, his trade bait has Justin Fields, who he just acquired from the Bears, and Jahmyr Gibbs. He's locked up Chase and Devonta Smith, the studs from that draft class. And it looks like he's going to use one of his studs plus his new quarterback to continue to build out his playoff team, hoping to go back-to-back in the division. Jags could do some really fun things, but they actually just have to participate. Look, he's been, I think, involved in free agency and making bids there. So good on you, but let's get some offers and some trade activity too here. There can be multiple facets to building this team instead of just showing up for the draft, showing up for free agency, and just kind of going on simulation for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I don't think the 112 gets them the wide receiver 1 that they want. So, like, some other form of activity is going to need to happen for them to really break through and, like, be cemented as a playoff team. The Jags kind of feel like the Rams of the AFC.
So the Jags, I feel like, have a few more of the pieces in place. Okay, Ridley is probably not your wide receiver 1, but he's going to give you wide receiver 1 weeks.
Yep.
Keon Coleman should continue to grow on that offense. The fact that none of the young players on Kansas City can stop breaking the law means Marquise Brown is going to have value. And he does have the 112. So what he's really looking at is another receiver, probably a tight end upgrade. Granted, Brenton Strange may have just tripped and fell into a pretty prime position with Jacksonville. And then defense. So he's got the 112, 212, and the rest of his picks to go do that with. And then there's also the ridiculous idea that if he wanted to trade off with Patrick Mahomes, he could probably use that to fill out some other aspects of his roster. Just the name value of him just by himself.
Yeah.
It's going to be able to step down into somebody who scores the same amount, at the same age, at the quarterback position, because he's got the Mahomes name on it. He'll be able to pick up maybe that receiver, maybe that tight end, maybe one of the key defensive pieces he needs. Because you mentioned the wide receiver he really needs like that D end, the linebackers. His secondary will work. I mean, he's got some pretty big names there based off of the who's who of those draft classes. But the thing he really needs is his front seven and a receiver and a tight end. He does that, and he's pushing for the division.
Yep.
And again, it's a matter of what you believe Brenton Strange is going to be.
I mean, out of those positions, I feel like tight end's the least the least concerning. But I do agree. I mean, getting a third one, somebody else that's on the field would always be nice.
Plus, I will say, I think he might be able to get more for that 112 than you think. I think in past years, I feel like veteran receivers, either who are just about to get paid or kind of in that just got their second real contract, following kind of that 12 to early teens range, where he could go shopping and probably get someone he's not expecting.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Of course, though, that would require him going shopping. So, but then, like I said, Texans, his offense, he's in a good enough spot. Again, it's really continuing to support that defense. He needs just more on defense. And again, I think that's what he's going to try and have this deal help him with if he moves either of the pieces I was talking about. But he just needs more.
Yep, I agree.
All right. So that's the AFC South. Like I said, I think there may be some trolling going on here. Can you come up with a good reason Saints is in this tier?
In the playoff team tier?
Yeah.
Not really. I have them as an on the fence team because he's not super far away from at least, making it in as a wild card. But yeah, the team's not too impressive, not yet at least.
I mean, he's got the picks to go do something with it and add. So, maybe it's people he drafts, maybe it's not. But
if he grabs a running back and a tight end, like the team will get some amount of wins. It's just like after acquiring that, tentpole running back and a decent tight end, it's going to be turning every single name on defense into a better name and like paying whatever cost to upgrade every single guy, because it's really just Ernest Jones and Asai and a decent secondary, but defensive tackles, Quinnen's all right. But like other than that, yeah, the defense needs like real attention. Definitely needs to improve depth on that. Wide receiver solid though.
Yeah, I mean, he's got I think 7 or 8 receivers. I think he needs to trade some of those out, but at the same time, he kind of needs all of those to give him the points he needs. So,
right,
it's going to require shallower positions and other things, or it's going to require a complete reshuffle of his room. So, but that said, I think there's a pack here of, call it the Giants, the Panthers, the Raiders on the lower end, the Falcons, the Lions, and the Commanders, who are well positioned, but need to lean in to fill some of those gaps. And I think they're going to address them in different ways, but I'm going to be a broken record here, but making some of the offers would help on some of this stuff. Like, I know I sent a lot of offers, but I'm not going to come over the hill and fix all of your teams for you.
Right.
Commanders has been trying to move one of his DNs for over a year. And I feel like it was the same trade bait last year. Hey, I've got these 3 really good DNs, and I've got these mid to late first round picks. And nothing got moved. And he ended up just taking 3 receivers with those picks. And Pearsall looks to be in a good position. Leggett had his moments. I don't know what the hell's going on with Polk. He had a couple of highlights, but still, like, he would probably say receiver is still something he's trying to add. And he just spent 3 first-round picks on that position last year. Like, maybe there's a better way. Like I said, Panthers had a really good draft last year, so I think him continuing to target youth and picks serves him well based off of his ability to scout. Raiders is new to the league, so he's still, I think, figuring some of this stuff out. But I think with some of how free agency has gone, his team is less far away from being able to compete for a wild card spot than I thought initially. Then, of course, you just have the bad luck Bears, the Buccaneers being in the NFC South. You have the Steelers and you have the Ravens being in the AFC North. That, it's a killing field, and just, you just got to outlast everyone else, get the 10 wins, and you'll be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we'll go up to the fringe contenders next. Got the Chiefs, got the Seahawks, and you've got myself, the Vikings, after some of last week's trades as I start taking draft capital and turning it into players. Still in that wonderful position where I couldn't make all the picks if I had to make them today, as Goose would call it, the dance. So we'll see how the next month takes my team, whether I blow it all up again or whether I solidify myself as a contender. We shall see. I like to keep it interesting, but obviously my need is on defense. I have really no DNs to speak of right now. I've thinned out my linebacker room, and my secondary has some pieces, but it probably is missing a stronger safety or corner option. But those I feel comfortable waiting to get. It's my offense that I'm feeling really good about. I've got 2 quarterbacks. I've got 2 top 10 running backs, again, considering health. I'm 4 deep at receiver with some upside positions, and I'm got probably in his last year the best tight end in the game, with 2 or 3 up-and-comers behind him. So I feel really solid about my offense. It's just a matter of using the picks I have to build out my defense.
Yep, I agree. You definitely need a defense. Your wide receiver room is going to do a lot of the legwork if the roster stays the same. Running backs aren't terrible, but I'm a little bit less optimistic on McCaffrey. I still think he's fantastic, but I question how productive he'll be. But yeah, I think you said it well. Like, defense really does need some attention. You're not terribly far off as far as linebacker. You have two quality linebackers with some depth thrown in there. Defensive end does need attention. I'd imagine you'll address that in the very near future. Yeah, safety is, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's still some safeties available in free agency, so that's not a huge concern.
Yeah, I think I'm fine waiting there. I feel good about Cisco as one. I think I'll figure out the other stuff, but for now, I don't want to just load my team up with stuff I've got to cut, in a couple of weeks. I think right now it's more a matter of sort of giving it some time and figuring where things settle. Let's see. We've got the Seahawks. Seahawks and Chiefs, belong together because the Seahawks are not quite the personification of a goose team in the NFC, but they're probably the closest we have. Two quarterbacks. He's got a ton of either starting last year or starting this year running backs. Just kind of players everywhere. He's at least 2 or 3 deep at every single position that you can be here. It's just going to be, kind of like everything else. He did, except for 1 or 2 instances, he doesn't really have a stud in any of these positions. It's more a matter of he's just deep, has multiple options, and he just needs kind of one of them to pop in any given week, and he's in a good spot. I think, some things still need to be determined. What happens with Aaron Rodgers, obviously. What happens with Nick Chubb, obviously, and some of that running back core. Definitely some shine comes off if you look a little bit deeper, but at least 2 or 3 deep at every position. He's definitely let's put fringe contender, depending on how sort of the rest of the offseason breaks for him.
Yep. Both teams are very much like they're just packed full of like mid-level, mid-level like talent, or mid-level production. A lot of like running back 2s, a lot of wide receiver 2s, tight ends insane for Seahawks at least. But yeah, to anybody that we've said, oh, you need to get better at depth, and you keep trying to trade and you can't find any depth, blame Seahawks and Chiefs. They're the one hoarding all the all the good complementary pieces. And if you accumulate enough complementary pieces, they'll just complement each other.
Yeah, I think Goose actually gives himself a challenge every offseason of, can I put a team together where my 2024, my previous year points are all under 200? Like, again, you look at his offense, and not a single player on his offense is over 200 points. And just because of the sheer volume at some of these positions and the sheer combination, like, he's going to have no problem getting 220, 240 points a week between what he has on his roster, because he's able to rotate so many things in and out on it. The only pieces he has over 200 are in his back 7. 2 linebackers, Byron Murphy and Cam Taylor-Britt at corner, and then a safety in Jesse Bates. So I'm sure now that that's been pointed out, he'll find ways to get under the 200-point threshold on those as well. But, not quite mirror images themselves, but very similarly put together. All right. So then we go to our 2 contenders. Nobody's surprised. It's Bengals and Browns. Bengals are the defending champions. He's got Joe Burrow, who just got his 2 top options paid this offseason. So he's not hurting for skill positions in any way, shape, or form. And then, again, Browns, now that he's got kind of Herbert locked in as a quarterback, I know he had some concerns there. Like, everything else is 3 deep at running back, with 2 of those guys really popping. All 3 around 250 points last year. At least 2 deep at receiver with major upside guys like Khalil Shakir. Goddard might be a little bit more flimsy than I thought it would be. I've heard he was potentially getting moved by Philly, so I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not. But tight end might be an Achilles heel, if anything. But the defense, again, resembles a goose defense where everyone is at or above triple digits. So it's just a matter of kind of who's the hot hand this week. And then, like I mentioned, Bengals. He's gone a little bit more for the big names. He's got maybe a year before he's going to start paying a bunch of these guys. So it'll be interesting to see. He'll do this year, and then how does he pivot into next year when he's got to figure out how to pay JSN? He's already paying Palmer big money, Waddle big money at their receiver position. Bijan's going to get the fifth-year option next year, but he's going to have to then extend him next year. That's going to get expensive.
Trey McBride
as well this year. So, as it has been said, that's future Chris's problem. But the right now, look, assuming he gets a similar target share of last year, Jauan Jennings as your third or fourth receiver is not a shabby place to be in when you're trying to repeat, especially when you've got the 10 poles he has.
Yep. I definitely think he's not as strong as last year when he won the championship. He's a little bit weaker at running back now. And all of this stuff can improve. His depth at linebacker, although I think he was pretty bad off as far as depth at linebacker last year, it's gotten a little worse. Safety position looks a little bit shaky, so definitely in a spot where he can be challenged by other teams in that division. But for the most part, Chris is just, he is expected to do it again, I guess you could say.
Yep. And again, this is the pre-draft power ranks here. So there's a lot to be said and done in terms of how things move around. But it's always nice to have kind of something to refer back to from the season of where were things kind of before any major moves happened during the draft, any major injuries happened during camp, and some of the major breakouts happened. So starting now, definitely looks like with 16 teams in the potential playoff area, we've got a lot of opportunity for moving day on draft day. So I'll be excited to see what it looks like after we draft. But besides drafting, everyone else's favorite activity seems to be trading. So go in and look at the trades that have happened since last week. Let's see, we were the 11th last week, right?
Yeah.
All right. So 18 trades happened. Let's start from the top here. I did give Jags some shit for not going out and making some moves. Selling off Kristen Fulton for a fourth-round pick. Again, it says sort of middle of the road in terms of projected stats next year. Fourth-round pick for that's not a bad thing, but I think, Casey let a couple things walk there, so might be a nice buy there for Panthers. I swapped out J.J. McCarthy for Geno Smith in the 114 with Saints. So, again, I like Geno in Vegas. The contract is right. And, another pick this time of year is a nice thing for me. And look, if J.J. McCarthy can dodge Aaron Rodgers in Minnesota, he's a starter there and, should return better than the value that Saints gave up. If he's got to put up with Rodgers for a year, he does it. And Saints is, again, I think, truly in that building category. He's not going to be too upset about having JJ just sitting there and letting, him appreciate value. Let's see. Rams moving to 313 for a third next year as Panthers try to pick up picks in this draft. as mentioned, Bears moving Justin Fields and the 305 for Najee Harris, JOK, and the 209. So, again, I'd say Harris probably, especially in the role he's in, carries late first value. If JOK doesn't retire, I think he's a very productive linebacker. But again, I think there's a lot of concern about whether he comes back from his neck injury. But, Bears is in a position to roll the dice on that and then upgrades from the 305 to the 209. So I think he gave up something around the 108 for Fields, and I'd say he probably got back something around the 115 in value for Fields. So kind of in that 70 to 80% range.
Yep. I think it was fine. I think it was a good trade for Bears. You get Najee, so you flush out an offense. He already has a quarterback, so like Fields is just extra value. So yeah, he gets a running back, a decent second round pick, and a gamble on we know when healthy, a productive linebacker. So I think it's perfectly fine.
All right. Giants and Panthers making one of their rare moves. Dante Fowler for the 228. You know what? I like it. It's probably the right cost for someone like Fowler, who, if he can put up another 7 to 10 sack season, is worth that. But it's not someone you necessarily want to depend on. So getting something like the 228 where you can get, one of these day 2 guys who's fallen, or early day 3 guys who you like at some of the prime positions, or a stash quarterback, or someone to kind of develop. It's right up Giants alley this time of year. So I like that deal.
Yep, so do I.
Andre Yelchavez for the Chiefs, 26 second. Look, I mean, he's a year 3 guy. Had 6 touchdowns last year because Burrow was just tossing them to everybody. Like, a nice complementary piece to have is the Bears, starts acquiring things. So, especially if there is an injury to Chase or Higgins, his value could absolutely pop, especially if Burton can't get his feet under him in Cincinnati. So, it's a nice buy, and I imagine that Bears is probably going to be extending him before things get expensive. He's 882 right now. I could see him sometime in the first 6 weeks or so, before enough games accumulate for him to calculate differently. An extension getting putting on him.
Yeah, that would probably be the best bet. He's a locker room favorite for Cincinnati, so I definitely expect him to see some playing time. His stat line for last year, I don't think, is unreasonable to expect that he'll do that. So yeah, I think that was a perfect price.
All right. A couple of mine here. Elijah Mitchell, Jalen Waddle, and Jonathan Greenard for Garrett Wilson and Khalil Herbert. Look, I mean, let's just be honest. This is all about Wilson for me. One of my favorite receivers, one of the guys I wanted to have as sort of a number 1 to complement Ayuk and Harrison for me. So happy to pay up for him. Look, Bengals added another Minnesota Viking, let alone one who's very reasonably priced and very productive last year. And then Mitchell signed I think 1-year deal with Kansas City. And look, Kansas City loves to go to San Francisco to pick up their spare parts. Worked out pretty well for Jerick McKinnon for them. Elijah Mitchell, very similar kind of player. So could end up being a nice little depth move for Bengals, where he picks up a couple of useful pieces for the one big one.
Yep. I like it a little bit more for Bengals, although I think Wilson is by far the most appealing part of this transaction. Paying Greenard on top of Waddle probably hurts, but that is the cost of getting a Garrett Wilson. Yeah, I think it's good. I know you're going to refill at defensive end, but it hurts because I don't think there's many players that you can replace Grenard with.
Yeah, not straight up. So again, we'll get creative. But again, I don't like sort of rounding out to I'll call it competitive roster and having a major hole like that, because that's when everyone starts upping their prices. But
right.
Speaking of, had kind of a glut of linebacker after sort of some recent moves. So Foyesana Oluokun and Akeem Davis Gaither for the 216. I had that kind of value on Oluokun, and Davis Gaither was found money after last year. So, getting a 216 for that is fine, especially since I needed to free up some years and some roster spots for draft picks. So I'm happy with that consolidation. Keelan Carson, I don't think it might have been a theft, but if it wasn't a theft, it was just kind of a straight up given.
Yeah.
Okereke and the 216 plus 2/5 that I just got to the Seahawks move to the 127. I mean, I kind of had mid-second values on both of these linebackers that I just moved. So taking 2 mid-seconds and moving to the 127 feels in range, considering the next pick literally was taking a future second and a mid-second to move up to the pick just before this. So, I get it. Okereke, it was one of those two where nothing ended up happening, but there was a lot of noise about the current administration in New York doesn't value Okereke like they probably should. And would he be on the roster when his roster bonus hit? I believe that was last Friday. And it hit, and he's still there. So, again, Seahawks adds another defensive player to what he needs on his team, and I moved 3 linebackers for a late first, which again is a tough thing to do this time of year. But yeah, like I said, Dolphins and one ups me trades the 126 for the 221 in a future second, as he continues to try and pick up more draft capital for next year. Colts taking Dondre Tillman from Chiefs, and Tillman was just bought. He was just bought in free agency right before this, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that was just a buyer's remorse thing.
I got you. Then our big trade. I've had the 103 and 107 and been chopping those around the league for the better part of the last month and a half. Time came. 103, 107, and Caden Ellis for Kyler Murray, Saquon Barkley, Travis Kelce, and Devin Lloyd. You drop a good amount of contract value on me. Add 2 top 10 picks and a pretty solid linebacker. You get to reposition. I get to fill some holes and kind of have what I feel like is a juggernaut offense. Everyone wins.
Yep. I just want to get younger. What is it? Like, Lloyd's replaced by Ellis. Kyler can be replaced by one of those picks. Barkley can be replaced by one of those picks. Kelce, Kelce was decent enough throw-in at most. I'm going to get 1 more year of production out of him. When I traded for him last year with Bill, he felt almost like a throw-in at that point, so I didn't have a massive amount of value, at least in my perception, tied into him. So I'm perfectly fine with this. I just get to get younger. Might have to find a quarterback elsewhere. Might just take wide receivers with those picks or running backs or whatever. But I'm happy with the value assessment.
Yep. Then we've got 2 taxi squad dumps for the 526 to 529. Riley Moss, again, I think another buyer's remorse.
Yep.
For the Browns, Chris Rodriguez, buyer's remorse for 5th.
Oh, wow.
Cowboys trying to clear some things off his roster using the Saints 5th, giving those to Bill. And then MVS recently signed in Seattle, while he's still their wide receiver 2 for the 325. So there we have it. We've got power ranks, we've got trades. I think next week is probably time to do a mock draft for either the NFL or for our fantasy league. Although, actually, I don't think I'm traveling next week. So that might have to wait till the first week of April. But nonetheless, that gives everyone time to get through a few more pro days, to brush up on their rookies, and catch a little bit more rookie fever as they start figuring out, hey, I'm a middle of the pack team. How do I move myself up or down before everybody else does so that I can still control my own destiny? But any other thoughts before we close up, RJ?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. So, hey, we've got 2 people watching us. So appreciate you guys. We'll kind of get the post-pod going here and see if any magic can happen. I'm feeling either insulted or inspired by what we put together here. But until next time, keep up the activity, and thanks for listening.